Hi and welcome to part 5 of the 65-story treehouse, continuing from chapter 11, The Future's Future. We swirl and swirl and swirl some more until we finally stop swirling. I've got some good news and some bad news, says Terry, looking out of the bin. The bad news is we're 650 million years in the future. The good news is we're at the beach. I look around. It's a weird beach. The sea is black, the sky is red. Oh yeah, we're surrounded by giant crabs. I can't understand why there are giant crabs everywhere, says the inspector. I'm sure I left the giant crab eliminator button on back at Safety Central Headquarters. Says Terry. I think I might have turned it off again when you weren't looking. I couldn't help it. I just really wanted to see a giant crab. You idiot, Terry, I say. Thanks to you, the future Earth is now overrun with giant crabs. Yeah, I know, says Terry, and I'm sorry, but look on the bright side. Giant crabs are pretty cool. Yeah, you're right, I say. They are extremely cool and very, very dangerous. It's interesting, though, says Terry, because this is just like what happens at the end of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. The time traveller goes into the future as far as he can, almost at the end of time, lands on a beach, and there are giant crabs all over the place. I thought the book was fiction, I say. So did I, says Terry, but it was obviously based on actual fact. H.G. Wells must have time-travelled here himself. Otherwise, how could he have described it all so exactly? Oh dear, says the inspector. Look over there. One of the giant crabs has got hold of an old-fashioned man and is waving him around in his giant crab claw. Gad, man, put me down. That's no ordinary old-fashioned man, says Terry. That's H.G. Wells. I recognise him from his author photo on the back cover of the book. That's him all right, I say. I'd know that moustache anywhere. We'd better go and help him, otherwise he won't be able to get back to 1895 to write The Time Machine and inspire you to build a time-travelling wheelie bin so that we can go back in time and get our building permit and save the treehouse from being demolished. Leave it to me, says the inspector, leaping out of the bin. I'll save him. Wait for us, I say. You can't fight a crab that big all by yourself. But the inspector is already too far ahead and too excited to hear me. He's really getting into this risk-taking thing, isn't he, says Terry. Yeah, I say, maybe a little too much. We better go and make sure he's okay. We jump out of the bin and run after him. Help me, man from the future, calls H.G. Wells as the inspector runs towards him. I'm caught in a giant crab's claw. Don't worry, Mr. Wells, says the inspector. I'll save you. How do you know my name, says H.G. Wells. I'll explain later, says the inspector. First, we need to teach this crab some good old-fashioned manners. Holding his pen and clipboard like a sword and shield, Inspector Bubble Wrap rushes towards the crab. But the crab snatches the inspector up in its other claw and waves him around in the air beside H.G. Wells. Oh dear, says Terry. That didn't work very well at all. Maybe I should try my balloon. He gets it out of his pocket. Hang on, I say. Snake charming is one thing, but I've never heard of crab charming, especially not giant crab charming. I'm not going to charm it, says Terry. Crabs hate the sound of screeching balloons. Everybody knows that. I didn't even know crabs had ears, I say. Well, technically they don't, explains Terry, but they can feel sound, and they don't like the feel of screeching balloons. Terry blows the balloon up, pinches the neck, and releases the air in a high-pitched screech directly at the crab. The crab's antennas start whipping around wildly in shudders. It shakes and it sways from side to side. Terry keeps up the screeching until the crab flings H.G. Wells and the inspector to the ground and scuttles away. Phew, that was a close shave, says H.G. Wells, standing up and brushing sand off his tweed suit. Closer for some than others, says Terry. Look at the inspector. He's been cut clean in half by the giant crab's claw. Oh no, I say. What are we going to do? Bubble wrap, says Terry. Good idea, I say. Popping bubble wrap always calms me down. Not for you, Andy, says Terry. For the inspector. We can use it to join him back up again. Quick, get his legs and hold them in place. Terry pulls on the inspector's roll of bubble wrap and wraps, and wraps, and wraps. Finally, the inspector is as good as new. He leaps to his feet and yells, That was awesome! Did you see me? I fought a giant crab and I wasn't even scared. Look at this selfie I took if you don't believe me. It was indeed very brave, says H.G. Wells, if not perhaps just a mite foolhardy. I am, however, forever in your debt, man from the future, and you too with the magical transparent wrap. Do you live here with the crustaceans? Oh no, we're from the past too, says Terry, only not quite as far back as you. You're time travellers, he says. Yes, says Terry. That's our time machine over there. It used to be a wheelie bin. I was inspired to convert it into a time machine after reading your book. Which book are you talking about? Says H.G. Wells. The Time Machine, of course, says Terry. The Time Machine, repeats H.G. Wells slowly. But I have not written any such book. Not yet, I say. But you will. Yes, I believe I will, he says. That sounds like an excellent idea. I'll write about my time-travelling adventures. That's what we do, says Terry. We mostly write about stuff that actually happens to us. Yeah, I say. Why make stuff up when real life is so interesting? You're writers too, says H.G. Wells. Yes, says Terry. I'm Terry and this is Andy. He does the words and I do the pictures. And I inspect buildings, says the big inspector. Inspector Bubble Wrap at your service. It's an honour to meet you. Well, I'm honoured to meet you all as well, says H.G. Wells. How can I ever repay you for saving me from the monstrous crab-like creature? Could you help us repair our time machine, says Terry. Possibly, says H.G. Wells. What exactly seems to be the problem? Our chronometer is stuck on the numbers 6 and 5, says Terry. Only the zeros are moving. H.G. Wells smiles and nods. Ah, yes, that's happened to me many times. Chronometers can be very temperamental. Let me have a look at it. Here's the problem, says H.G. Wells. This bit of popcorn was stuck in the perambulator. I've reset the chronometer, but it's a little damaged. I'm afraid it will only get you back to the time from which you started your journey. Thanks, H.G., says Terry. Yeah, thanks, I say. We can't get our building permit, but at least we can get back to our time. I understand, says H.G. Wells. I am as eager to return to my time as you are to yours. As you know, I have a novel to write, and as usual, the deadline is looming. And with your permission, I'd like to include you in my story and describe your heroic acts. That might be a problem, I say. Our contract with our publisher, Mr. Bignose, doesn't allow us to appear in anyone else's books. I see publishers are no more reasonable in your time than they are in mine, says H.G., nodding. I guess some things never change. Rest assured, I won't mention you in my narrative. Does your publisher also have a big nose, says Terry. As a matter of fact, it is rather large, says H.G. I have a picture of him here. See? Yikes, says Terry. Well, all's well that ends well, says H.G. It's been a pleasure, gentlemen. Goodbye and good time travelling. We wave goodbye and H.G. Wells' time machine disappears into the past. I wish we could take one of the giant crabs back with us, says Terry. Nice idea, I say, but they are quite dangerous, and besides, there's no way we could fit one in the bin. That's a pity, says Terry. I'd love to see who would win out of a fight between a giant crab and the Trunkinator. Yeah, me too, says the inspector. That would really be something to see. We climb into our time machine. Hold on tight, says Terry. Here we go. Back to the present. Swirl. Chapter 12. Back to the present. As we swirl our way backwards through time, I have my fingers crossed we'll arrive safely back at the treehouse. It feels like we've been away for ages. Hey, I can smell marshmallows, says Terry. And lemonade, says the inspector. And chocolate, pizza, ice cream, lollipops, dodgem cars, popcorn and ants, I say. We must be getting closer to the treehouse. I open the lid of the bin and see that, sure enough, we are hurtling straight towards our tree. Our treehouse. Our ant farm. Our ant farm. Our ant farm. The ant farm that Jill made us promise never to disturb again. Terry, can you steer us away from the ant farm? I say. Into the chocolate fountain instead, maybe, or the swimming pool. I can't control it, says Terry. I forgot to ask H.G. Wells to fix the steering. Brace yourselves. Smash! Wow, I'm smashing into an ant farm. We all fall out of the bin onto the level where the ant farm used to be. There are ants everywhere, angry ants even angrier than they were before. It doesn't take them long to regroup into a massive angry ant fist. The ant fist rises above us. We shut our eyes and prepare to be ant fist punched into oblivion. Smile! I wait, but nothing happens. I open my eyes. The ant fist is still poised above us, but it's not coming down. The inspector seems slightly disappointed. I look across at Terry. There's a large, weird-looking ant sitting on his head. It's wiggling its antennas towards the ants in the ant fist. Is there something on my head, says Terry. Yes, I say. A big ant. I think it's talking to our ants. It must be the prehistoric ant I saved from the exploding big nososaur, says Terry. It's been in my pocket the whole time. I forgot all about it. That's not the only thing you forgot about, says a tiny voice below us. We look down and see a tiny person with a mini megaphone. Jill, I say, is that you? Of course it's me, she says. Where have you been? You went off and left me here all small. I was nearly eaten by a spider, you know. Do you have any idea how scary spiders are when you're the size of an ant? I'm so sorry, Jill, I say. We had to go travelling back in time to get a building permit for the treehouse to stop it being demolished. But Terry couldn't control the time machine, and we went all over history and into the future, and we, well, sort of forgot all about you. Well, that's pretty obvious, she says. We've been on quite a journey, that's true, says the inspector. But according to my watch, only a few minutes have passed since we left. It's been much longer than that for me, says Jill. Time passes faster when you're small. I've been living with the ants for a whole year. I thought you were never coming back. Jill's year with the ants, at a glance. Stupid sugar cubes. Hey, I found a hamburger. We need to give it a proper burial, but it's already dead and we're hungry. Dead beetle. Watching Auntie the Antsy Ant. Awesome, brilliant, so boring. Battling a deadly ant-eating spider. Removing a wandering giant anteater. Will you ever be able to forgive us, I say. Oh, I suppose so, says Jill. I have to admit it wasn't all bad. The real question is whether the ants can forgive you for breaking your solemn promise never to disturb their ant farm ever again. Dangerous. Hazard. Broken glass. Regulation 105A, Section 3. It appears they already have, I say. Well, Terry at least. Look, they formed themselves into a massive certificant of gratitude. To Terry, with deep gratitude for saving our prehistoric ancestor from the exploding big nososaur. You are a hero of all ant kind, and we will never squash you or stomp on you or Andy ever again. Love from your pals, the ants. Signed, Queen Ant. That is so typical of the ant kingdom, says Jill. Ants are some of the nicest people I've ever met. Would you like me to draw you back to normal size, says Terry. Not right now, says Jill. There are a few things I need to do, and I think the ants are going to need a little help rebuilding their farm. I'll call you on the micro-mini megaphone when I'm ready. Well, that all worked out quite nicely, says Terry. Yes, I say, except we still don't have our building permit. Oh, yeah, says Terry. I completely forgot. That's why we went time travelling in the first place. And now we can't go back because our time machine is broken. I turn to the inspector. So do we still need the permit? I'm afraid so, he says. Without the permit, I can't cancel the demolition, and I can't issue a permit because your treehouse violates almost every section of the building code. But can't you make an exception, says Terry. Just this once. You really seem to enjoy your trip through time and all the dangerous stuff that happened. Well, yes, says the inspector, but... And doing the chariot race was way more dangerous than our rocking horse racetrack or Dodgem car rink, says Terry. And that pit of asps makes our snakes and ladders level look as harmless as a petting zoo, I remind him. And aren't you the guy who fought a giant crab, says Terry. Remember this? Terry shows the inspector his selfie. Yeah, says the inspector. I did, didn't I? I really did fight a giant crab. You sure did, I say. Nobody's ever fought a bigger or more dangerous crab in the history of the entire world. The inspector rubs his chin thoughtfully. Well, let's see. I mean, given everything that we've been through, I'm prepared to be a little bit flexible. I can overlook some things like the sharks, the bowling alley and the chainsaws, but there's absolutely no way I can ignore the fact that you do not have a disabled access ramp, and therefore I simply cannot issue the permit no matter how much I would like to. My hands are tied. What if we build one? I say. Well, of course, says the inspector. If you build a ramp, I can issue the permit and then call off the wrecking crew, but I'm afraid you don't have much time. They'll be here any minute. No problem, I say. We can do it. But we're going to need some extra Andys and Terrys. Come on, Terry. To the cloning machine. We haven't a moment to lose. With the help of our clones and some of Jill's animals, we build the ramp at super speed and have it ready just in time for the grand opening. Grand disabled access ramp opening. So, I say to the inspector, what do you think? I've inspected a lot of ramps in my time, he says, but this is by far the most dangerous one I've ever seen. I love it. He signs a piece of paper on his clipboard, hands it to us and says, the ramp you've built is perfect and has earned my stamp of approval, so your treehouse now has a permit and there's no need for its removal. Cool, says Terry. We can put the permit on the tree trunk right next to my certificate. The inspector shakes our hands and says, and now there's nothing for me to do but to go and cancel the wrecking crew. And so I take my leave of you and bid the two of you adieu. The inspector grabs a vine and swings down through the leaves and into the forest. Now can I say it, says Terry. Say what? That everything has worked out quite nicely. Not really, I say, because there's still one thing we haven't done. What thing, says Terry. We still haven't written our book and it's due in at 12 o'clock. What time is it now? Almost 12 o'clock. Says Terry. Chapter 13, the last chapter. But it will be impossible to do the book by 12 o'clock, says Terry. We haven't even started it. Speak for yourself, I say. I've done chapter 1 and I started chapter 2, but I had to stop because you were strangling me. Well, yes, but technically that wasn't me, says Terry. It was the ants pretending to be me. Well, yes, technically, but it was your fault the ants were so angry, I remind him. Well, technically, yes, he says, but technically you were responsible for them being angry as well. Well, if you want to get technical about it, yes, that's true, but it was you who left the gate open. Well, technically, yes, but technically... Excuse me, shouts Jill through her micro-mini megaphone. Can I interrupt for a minute? Well, technically you already have, I say. Why don't you just ask the ants to help you, she says. How could they help, I say. They're very good at forming words and pictures, and they can do it very fast, says Jill. You know how quickly they made the certificate. But how could they write and illustrate a whole book, I say? They don't even know the story. Easy, says Jill. You tell it to me and I'll tell it to them, and they'll have it done in no time. OK, I say. Well, my name is Andy. And I'm Terry, says Terry. And we live in a tree, I say. Says Jill. I already know all this. You might want to speed it up a bit. Remember, you haven't got much time. Good point, I say. We'll speed talk it. Blah 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 blah. Doomed to fail. What happened next? Blah 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 blah. Wow, I wish I had been there too. You were there, knucklehead. Blah 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 blah. Okay, they're ready, says Jill. Watch this. Wow, look at them go, says Terry. They're forming the pages right in front of our very eyes. That's our best book ever, I say. And to think that it's all made by ants. But how are we going to get it to Mr. Bignose on time? I know, says Terry. Let's go ask the 3 wise owls. Do you really think that's such a good idea, says Jill. Yes, says Terry. They're very wise. I'm not so sure about that, says Jill. But they were the ones who suggested we go time travelling to get our permit, I say. And that was a good idea. Well, sort of. All right, says Jill. I guess it can't hurt. She jumps onto my shoulder and we all head up to the wise owl's house. Oh, wise owl, says Terry. How can we get our book to Mr. Bignose on time? Cheese sticks, elbow, hoo, blibber, blabber, blue. Chicken, chutney, boop, boop. What are they trying to tell us, I say? I don't know, says Terry, but it sounds very wise. Not to me it doesn't, says Jill. It just sounds like they're saying random words. They're not random, says Terry. You put them together and they reveal a hidden meaning. OK, says Jill. What's the hidden meaning of cheese sticks, elbow, who, blibber, blabber, blue, chicken, chutney, poop, poop? Terry looks at me. I look at Terry and we both shrug. Knees, licorice, scrapbooking. Suddenly we hear a loud roar and a motorbike flies through the leaves of the tree and skids to a stop in front of us. The rider dismounts and removes his helmet. Inspector Bubble Wrap, I say. At your service, he says. But I'm not an inspector anymore. I'm a stuntman. You can call me Super BW from now on. The BW stands for Bubble Wrap. But safety is your life, says Terry. It was my life, says Super BW. But I've swapped my hard hat for a helmet and decided to become a stuntman. I came back to thank you both for changing my life for the better. But what's the matter? You look worried. It's our new book, I say. We have to get it to Mr. Bignose in less than 1 minute, but his office is in the city on the other side of the forest. Fructose, fruit tingles, boop boop. Sounds like a job for Super BW, he says. I'll not only get it there on time, but I'll do it in the most spectacularly dangerous and thrilling way possible. Your new disabled access ramp will be perfect for a stunt like this. Super BW takes our book, puts on his helmet, remounts his bike and rides out of the tree and into the forest to get the longest run-up possible. Clear the ramp, I say. Super BW is coming through. We hear the revving of his bike's engine, and then Super BW comes speeding up the ramp, shoots off up into the air, flies over the forest towards the city. and approaches the office of Big Nose Books, where Mr. Big Nose is sitting at his desk, watching Super BW come closer, and closer, and closer, until he smashes through the window and delivers the book, and then rides out again. That was amazing, says Terry. Yeah, I say, I've never seen a jump like it, but when he threw the book on Mr. Big Nose's desk, the ants went everywhere. Don't worry, says Jill. They'll remember their places and get back into position very quickly. Can you draw me normal size again, please, Terry? Sure, he says. Maybe I keep the micro-mini megaphone, though, says Jill. It'll come in handy for talking to giraffes. And giants, I say. I fixed Jill. What about her other leg? Speaking of ants, says Jill, I'd better be getting back to my pet salon. I've promised the prehistoric ant that I'll update his hairstyle. The one he has at the moment is a little old-fashioned. Hi, penguins! He finally drew her other leg. I wish he'd draw me some wings. Well, I say, after Jill has gone, I guess we'd better be getting up to Tree NN. We've got some important news to announce. What, says Terry? That we're going to add another 13 stories to the treehouse. Yay, says Terry, a 78-story treehouse. Can one of the new stories be a drive-through car wash that we can drive through with the windows down? I've always wanted to try that. Me too, I say. Let's do it. The end. That is the end of the 65-story treehouse. Hope you enjoyed that story, guys. I'll be back soon with loads more stories and videos on my channel. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye-bye.